that story I told, maybe she's right. He was just great. But there was also tremendous care and respect for form. We bowed in a certain way. We greeted people graciously. We worked with one another, and we'd get upset, but we tried to be collaborative. And he said, no, then you have to make it the minute particulars. You have to do it both in the universal, but what you're saying also in the intimate.
The planes affect one another.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. And that is the heart wisdom.
Oh, good. We're done. That's great. Well, let me ask you then about suffering, because it's one thing to speak about this, but then there are losses that come. A child dies, or some trauma or abuse or some circumstance for us, people we love, or just people in the world. And how do we hold this from that wise, that place of loving awareness, most respectfully?
Most respectfully, huh? I want to say we love them, but I don't feel that that's realistic. We hold suffering. We watch our minds to see where our analysis of the suffering goes. And if your loved one suffers, whoever close to you or in the world, then it seems to me it's their suffering. Their suffering, it's their karma. It's not your karma. Your karma is how you're reacting to the suffering. And you're reacting to with crying and yelling, laughing. That's your karma, and that's what your responsibility is, that you deal with your own karma. But that isn't. Wow. I'm reviewing the traumas and deaths of people I've known I'm saying it right. Let them have their own karma.
Hmm.
How about you?
One of the things that I've tried to learn over the years is not to armor or harden my heart. There are ways in which the suffering of people I love, and that sense of love can grow to lots of people
Yeah.
or places,
Yeah.
is hard to bear. And yet I also know that for me, it's been a gateway. A gateway, it brings me back somehow to a bigger way of being. And it's liberating in some way. So, yes, it's their suffering and it's my response, but in another way I see my practice as learning how to bear witness to and bear my own suffering as well as others. And as I do, there comes then there comes both a sense of greater freedom. I'm less afraid of the grief and tears and suffering, and I'm also more connected.
Yeah.
So I'm both closer and at the same time freer.
Why did Buddha say as the first thing he said after his enlightenment? There is suffering.
I wish I knew why he said that. I mean, it's a great question. I'll have to ask him. But I can fantasize. The Four Noble Truths, which are central to all these Buddhist schools, are that there's suffering, there are causes for suffering, there's an end to suffering, there's liberation, freedom, and there's a path, the middle path, a way to end suffering. And those, at least as I've read and heard, are in the form of a traditional Indian medical diagnosis, that here's our human problem,
Yeah.
in some way, the illness of the world, which he set out to find a cure for. And so first you define this is the problem.
This is
Where what we're faced with, and then here's the solution. Here's the possibility of joy, of freedom, of well-being, and here's how you can live to discover this for yourself. And I think that there's something. So to me, it was so helpful because I came from a lot of family pain. My father was violent and abusive and used to beat my mother black and blue, so she'd have to wear long sleeve clothes because she couldn't go out and show what had happened to her, and we were all afraid, and it was a pretty painful situation and very unpredictable. And when I first heard that suffering is part of life, that it's not a mistake, or that I didn't do something wrong.
Yeah, that's good.
That was enormously relieving. Okay, and then there are ways to live where you can reduce suffering or minimize or eliminate certain, or even if there's outer suffering or pain, where you can be free. I want to learn this. And it wasn't theoretical. It was like, how do I deal with this? How do I do this?
Yeah.
So for me, the first noble truth of suffering was a doorway that I wanted to find out about.
That's very, very helpful to me. They're very helpful. That's very helpful because you can do something. That's the message of suffering.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. And it helps me also globally, politically, because when I look out in the world and I see that no amount of computers and internet and nanotechnology and biotechnology, all this new stuff, is going to stop continuing war and continuing racism and continuing environmental destruction. Because the underlying causes are greed and fear and hatred and separation. And those are the causes of suffering.
Yeah.
And those can be addressed. Those can be made conscious. If we can't bear our suffering, we put it on somebody else. I think James Baldwin said that he imagined the reason people hate so much is because they sense that once their hatred is gone, they'll be forced to deal with their own pain. And so it's the communists or the immigrants or the Muslims or somebody, because we can't bear our own measure of sorrow, our own fears and insecurity. And if we can, then the world starts to change, because then we're all in it together. We're it's not them, it's us.
Yeah. Yeah. Questions?
Do we want to see if there are questions that people have for us? Hi.
Sure. If you're ready to take a few questions, I have a few here. So first off, I have a question from Bernice Foster, and Bernice asked me to read this question out loud. So I'm going to do so. When Jack talked about being at the monastery, and they had all these particular ways to greet one another to pray, he was reminded by the guru that the work is on multiple planes, to which Ram Dass agreed. And I'm sure there's more to that as they understood each other's point, but I am not sure I understand the concept. Could you elaborate, perhaps?
About multiple planes, really.
Yes.
We've been talking about this. The planes of roles in society, and the plane of soul, role and soul. That's two planes. And in sadhana, spiritual work, you get from one to the other, and when you get to the other, you then have two planes you can live on. You can keep the temple clean on one plane and meditate on another plane.
So there's a dimension of our being that is timeless, that is loving awareness, as you call it, Ram Dass, the one who knows, as my teacher called it, that is the witnessing of experience. And to be able to rest in the space of witnessing frees the heart to be joyful, spacious, at ease, no matter what happens. And there's a beautiful passage from the Buddha that's a kind of instruction in this way, where he says, live in joy and ease even among the troubled. Live in joy and health even among the afflicted. Live in joy and love even among those who hate. Quiet the mind, open the heart, to know the sweet joy of living in the way or living the Dharma. And so this speaks to the possibility of finding a well-being or a joy that you can carry and embody in all the ups and downs of your life. This is the loving awareness that's timeless, and it's not, there's praise and blame and gain and loss, but it's not touched by those. And then the other dimension that Ramdas has been talking about wedding the two, or in the monastery, the temple, is that then when you are standing in line at the grocery store, or you're dealing with your teenage children or your aging parent, that also is the place to see and to tend as if it is the divine, as if it's holy, with the spirit of loving awareness, and to embody it in your words and your deeds. And that wedding of an inner sense of joy and freedom or love, together with each moment's action, living in the present, is those two coming together. And that's what is a kind of fulfillment of spiritual life. It's not someplace in the Himalayas, but it's really where we are and what that spirit of heart and tending can do where we are.
That's a form of yoga. It's karma yoga.
Karma yoga, to serve.
Yeah.
It would be bhakti yoga if you did it as a form of devotion, right? That everything you did was God or the holy in some form.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
Great, thank you. I have another question from Christine, and I'm going to see if we can turn on the mic. Christine, I hope you're ready. Christine Truehead, I think is, or True is the name. So I'm going to pass the mic. Christine, if you want to ask your question, you're live.
Okay, you can hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I posed a question in response to your discussion of loving awareness, a few months ago, Ramdas, you talked about being interested in compassion as being a term that embodies more action than the word love can. And that's paraphrasing and not no doubt exactly what you said, but I thought a lot about that, and I was wondering whether you could expound on that a bit. That rings true to you.
Compassion, Ramdas, compassion, you said some months ago, embodies more action than love in some way, and would you add to that?
I don't remember quite saying it that way, but compassion compassion is love. It's love about suffering.
Yes.
It's love about suffering. When you love something or somebody and they suffer, your heart goes out to them, and you do anything for alleviating the suffering. This is all compassion. This is all compassion. I don't quite know what more I should say about that.
In the Buddhist Brahma Viharas, or the divine states, much as you say, Ram Dass, compassion arises when love meets suffering. It changes to a different state, which is related, but there's a resonance with the suffering of another, and you feel it. And then the response, Thich Nhat Hanh at some point said compassion is a verb, because it's not enough to feel for that being, but then there's a response that's called for, which you described. And sometimes the response might be a direct action. You see somebody who's hungry and you feed them, which is the instruction from your guru. Sometimes it's simply to let them know that they're not alone. One of the greatest gifts in spiritual practice, and it's there in the Buddhist compassion practices, that when somebody is going through a loss, the loss of their child or some other great loss, to help them understand that it's not just theirs, but that they're there with all these other people who've suffered a similar loss, and that they're part of the web of life. I was teaching with Pema Chodron in San Francisco a few years ago, an evening, and it was a lot of people. There was a couple or a few thousand people, on compassion. And one woman stood up whose partner had committed suicide 2 weeks before. She was young, and she was really suffering and distraught, so much grief. And suicide is very complicated because there's grief and there's anger and there's guilt and what should I have done and could I have done and how dare they and all those things. And Pema talked to her about holding everything in compassion, all the experience, and the room settled. And I could feel how alone she felt. So I asked how many other people in the room, in this auditorium, had someone in their family or really close to them die from suicide. And I think 200 people stood up, 8% or something. And then I said, would you please look at her? And I asked her, would you look around? And just the glance, the mercy, the love from everybody else who had suffered as she had, changed. It made it into a temple, because there was the suffering with the compassion, and it didn't. Sometimes it's in action, but sometimes it's just knowing that we're with you, and that we bear this with you in some very deep way.
Yeah.
So.
Namaste.
Namaste.
That was a very beautiful experience. Wow.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that question, Christine. I'm going to mute your mic now, and we're going to turn to Michael. He has a question. Let me just try to unmute his mic. Whoa. Let me just change there. Screen kind of flickered around. Robin, I'm not sure if you're still with us, but might have. Hold on a second. Okay. Michael, I'm going to pass you a mic. You can try to talk now. Michael, are you there? Michael Cram?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes we can. Great.
Yes. Sorry about that. The screen just fluttered and I got a beautiful butterfly on my screen.
I think we all did. There was a little glitch/gift there. So,
So I have a sort of existential question that I'm going to try and make an elevator speech out of about my life. I've spent a lot of time in my head as an intellectual and not very much time in my heart. And I was wondering if there was any one piece of advice of the first step that one could take on a journey to moving out of one's head and out of one's ego and into one's heart.
Beautiful question.
It's a beautiful. that's it's a question of our culture. That so many people are in their heads and forget about their hearts, their spiritual hearts. And the spiritual heart is with you all the time, even though you're working your mind. Do you have an answer for that? Because
I have a little to say, and then maybe you'll add more still. And it's kind of practical, and I'm very touched by the question.
Yeah.
It is because one of my teachers in the forest monastery was asked what he thought of modern culture, how it looked from the jungles of the Buddhist monastery, and he said 3 words, his description of modern culture: lost in thought, was how it looked to him. So the 2 practical things, I would say, you're asking what would help. One is to consider doing hospice work. I don't know where you live, but in the Bay Area there's this wonderful Zen Center hospice, but all around the country there's volunteer hospices. And there's something about the sadhana, or the practice of volunteering and sitting with people as they're dying, where you can't be in your head, where it just opens your heart, because that's all that matters at that point. They're not interested in anything else in some way or other. And people think it might be a horrible thing, but in fact it's one of the richest, most moving, beautiful work you can do.
Yeah.
So if you were to undertake a practice, yes, you could do a loving kindness or compassion practice, and there are beautiful tapes and CDs from Sharon Salzberg and Pema Chodron. You might start to do that kind of practice. But hospice work would really serve, should it be available and of interest to you, Michael.
I think that's a great answer, because that is the sadhana for somebody who's caught in their head. I think a good way is to witness your thoughts, bring your attention to your heart space, keep it there, and witness your heart from that place. Witness your mind from that space. And you'll see your thoughts go by, and you'll see how many thoughts you feel you have to identify with. Remember, you're the witness. You're not the thought. You're the witness. You're not the thought. And so you're witnessing you're witnessing your escape from your mind. And Michael, you want to do one thing while you're witnessing those thoughts. Love them. Love them. Don't just discard them, love them. And loving them is the way to elevate them. Elevate them.
Because they're trying to protect you or plan for you or things.
Yeah.
You could, if it's helpful, you can put your hand on your heart when you're there and you're witnessing loving awareness. And,
Yeah.
and don't be shocked by the repetition of thoughts. My friend Annie Lamott, she wrote, "My mind is like a bad neighborhood. I try not to go there alone," which is why she sits with other people, you know. The mind has no pride, and it, you know, it's quite repetitive, and it does all these things. Mine does anyway, if yours is like mine. And so you can also be amused by it. You can love it and say thank you, you know, and there you are, thank you for your opinion, and rest in that place of loving awareness.
Michael, are you satisfied?
Are you still there?
Michael, are you still there? There he is.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you satisfied?
We're having some minor technical difficulties on the user's end, so no problem. Yes, absolutely. Such a beautiful answer. Thank you so much.
Sweet.
The thought of moving out of one's head by doing action that will affect the heart is something that I've always thought about, but I've just never, no pun intended, taken action on. And then the thought of just loving the moment was so beautiful that it just brings me to tears. That's perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Next question.
Thank you. Yes, we have another question from Christine Wheeler. I'm going to go through and turn on her microphone. Christine, you should be on now. Yes, you might want to turn the volume on your speakers down a little bit. It seems like a little bit of feedback. It should be just a regular volume control. Probably have a set of speakers that are, they might have a knob on them, or
Is that any better?
still kind of loud, but I think we'll be okay if you just maybe back off from the computer a little bit if the microphone is there.
Is that any better?
Yes, that's fine. I think we'll be all right. Great.
Okay. If I may, I think go back to the topic separate. And I thought and also Stephen Levine, and from that perspective, I think there were something times, for example, you, Jack, talking about people who had been out quickly getting the way of their lives, like regret, or people finding
Christine, sorry to interrupt you. It's just it's cutting in and out a lot with the mic. I'm not sure if that's, if I made it worse by telling you to move back a little bit. Maybe just try it again, just one more time. If not, we're going to have to either, try moving closer. Maybe that was it. Sorry. Ooh, just a lot of interference. Give it one more shot here. Otherwise, if you could write the question to me, then I'll read it if this doesn't work. But let's just try it one more time here. Sorry.
Is that any better?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Now, I was saying about having read Stephen Levine, even when someone passes away, let it make your heart a little bit. Now, with everything that's happening in the world now, I find it all incredibly painful, but I feel what I'm doing is using that and trying to keep my heart open to encompass it all and to perhaps transmute it into love, if you know what I mean by that, or if you can comment on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I didn't hear the phrase from Stephen Levine. That was the one sentence I didn't hear. What is it that you were using from Stephen?
To let it rip your heart open.
Oh.
What?
To let it rip your heart open.
Khalil Gibran, your pain is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding.
Boy.
It's powerful and beautiful and really hard what you say, and even to answer. I don't want to be superficial because there is this tremendous field of suffering of both humanity and environment in the world, and to keep your heart open is a very hard thing. So first, just to honor your practice, that you are doing this, and to know somehow at the same time that to do it you become the witness of this whole dance of incarnation with praise and blame and pain and pleasure and beauty and tragedy.